This comes from Andy. We're talking about Sicknote Britain. I mean, it comes up, goodness me, how many more times can this subject come up? How do we solve it? Andy says, I don't work due to mild physical and several mental health conditions due to years of abuse as a child. I also have autism, which comes with its own struggles. Lately, many people have jumped on the autism and ADHD bandwagon to claim sickness benefits and PIP. One thing I have found interesting is the number of people who are self-diagnosing from tests they find on the internet. Yeah, I'm aware of that being a thing as well. If a person has been officially diagnosed with autism, they are given by law a certificate. Most people I know who claim to have autism don't and never have been given a certificate. It's about time the DWP checked all these so-called neurodivergent claimants, says Andy in Bridgend. You make a brilliant point, and somebody like Andy is exactly the kind of group of people where there should be assistance. I mean, that's just, I have to keep saying that, because otherwise somebody will say, it was Lee yesterday telling me online, no, you know, you're giving the impression. No, only a half-wit would have that impression, and we can't help those people. Most people understand. Somebody's got a disability and needs assistance. That's where our tax pounds should go. They just shouldn't go to people who haven't got any of that. Sicknote Britain draining £212 billion a year from the UK economy. Now, of course, many of those will be genuine issues, as we've just been discussing, but ill health is apparently keeping millions out of work. Inactivity is up 800,000 since 2019, set to rise by another 600,000 by 2030. 93% of fit notes say not fit for work, are too often rubber-stamped, and Britain now lags behind Europe on inactivity. What the heck is going on? Let's speak with Maxwell Marlow, Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. I've said this about 3 times in the last half an hour, Maxwell, that this isn't one of those stories that you look at. We get bad news every now and again, whether it's economic news, political news of some sort, but you think, well, don't worry, hold tight, because give it a year or so and it will reverse and everything will go back to normal. This isn't one of those kind of stories. Every projection around this says it's going to get worse, significantly worse. This is unsustainable. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so this is the thing. I mean, there's a systems thinker called Stafford Beers who says the purpose of the system is what it does. And we can see from what's happening at the moment with this ginormous rise in the number of people who are claiming sick notes, without any further consultation. Our benefit system is literally set up to help people get out of the workplace and get onto the sofa where taxpayers can then, subsidise their lifestyles. And of course, you're right. We have people who are unable to work. There are mental health problems since the lockdowns that happened so long ago have stayed with us ever since. The fact our economic conditions are in the toilet, to put it politely, is giving people a lot of stress. And also, of course, we have all of these government schemes, such as Motability, for example, which are, literally engineered to give taxpayer money to car companies in order to essentially, profligate a lot of these living standards. I think it's really quite remarkable. So you're right. Until the government can get a grip and really fix this issue, we are going to be in a world of pain as taxpayers.
We've talked about this a lot over the last couple of days, about areas that are just unsustainable, and no one's really calling that out, Maxwell. No one's saying it out loud, at least. We hear politicians sort of talk, we're addressing it, we're attempting to, we want more people back to work, whether it's pensions, we're looking at new ways to fund this, and the NHS, which is off the scale in terms of the amount of money it spends and the amount of people it employs. This is there's a kind of almost the sort of thing you'd make a Netflix drama about. There's a kind of storm coming round the corner, and it's arriving very, very fast.
Of course, and if we don't get a handle on these, these welfare claims, then it's going to put, the UK out of business fundamentally. I mean, we've seen this repeatedly when it comes to, workplace productivity. We've seen the growing size of youth unemployment, and part of that is to do with the fact that the minimum wage, in my opinion, is too high. But also we've got these new labour laws coming in, which are going to make things much more difficult. Add on top of that the fact that university degrees just aren't what they used to be. And now we've got this kind of sick note culture, which I think gives young people, or people who can't find work, basically an excuse not to, go out and get hired. But also it speaks to the companies fundamentally, Ian, right? I mean, I've seen stories of young people sending out 300, 400 applications to jobs in the local area. Nobody's hiring. So the best thing you can do is sit and wait, essentially, on the benefit system, claim out on anxiety or whatever else, and then just wait for them to come along. So until we can improve the economy, which in part relies upon fixing the system, I think this is going to get much, much worse, as this report has indicated.
But I also wonder if, in its basic form, you've got, you mentioned university. Everybody goes to university now, so the value of that degree is perhaps, less than it would have been maybe 25 years ago or so. Certainly the perception of it would be. And of course, if you've spent 3 years at university, you're 50 grand in debt, you've worked really hard, you've got your degree, but you can't get a job. But you do get a job in a coffee shop or something. It doesn't take long before the rot sets in and you think, what am I doing working here? I don't want to work in a coffee shop. Now, that might make you feel angered, it might make you feel a bit peeved and maybe a bit anxious about your future. But that doesn't mean you've got a mental health condition. But I sense we've kind of transposed ordinary feelings and given them a name now. And that's sort of why we've ended up in this place. And I think a big percentage of those young people in those positions that I've just described, Maxwell, genuinely believe they do have a mental health condition. It's not like they're making it up in the conventional sense. They believe that being a bit peed off about the workplace constitutes a mental health condition.
Well, yes, you definitely could say that. I mean, I'm an optimist about these things. I don't think people do want to be languishing with a mental health condition and sick note culture. I think people do find fulfilling purpose in work. And, but unfortunately, the way in which our economy is currently set up, the way our tax system works, our regulatory system works, the way the economy flows, really does mean that a lot of the young people especially are kind of caught at the sharp end of this. Absolutely. But I will just say, Ian, on this point about universities and debt, of course people are put into these university systems, but you don't have any debt at the end of it. I just want to very quickly clarify that point. You don't carry debt. What you have is you have basically an account with the government, which you pay down with a graduate tax over time. And I think there should be more education about this fundamentally, because if I go out and apply for a loan or for a mortgage, they're not going to count my student debt against me like a conventional debt or loan. But what we have instead is a really expensive graduate tax, and I think the anxiety comes in here, Ian, which is that the interest rates on those loans are so high that you will most people will never pay them off. So of course it's going to really affect how people feel about these things. And just on the anxiety point, I think young people increasingly online, well, very much online, I should say, there are no kind of checkpoints for them to say, actually, am I anxious? Am I depressed? What's going on? People live in very circular lives and in echo chambers fundamentally, and until something can break that cycle, this isn't going to change.
Spot on. Maxwell, thank you as ever. Maxwell Marlow is Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute.